I begin today by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land upon which this podcast is recorded, and I pay my respects to the elders past, present, and emerging.
Dark mirror.
Dark mirror.
Dark mirror.
Dark mirror.
Dark Mirror with Jessicka Anne.
Hello and welcome to Dark Mirror. It is me, your host, Jessicka Anne, and today's conversation is a really important one for those of us that are multidimensional, people that are visionary, people that are creative, people that are deeply feeling. Mish Stark is someone who I had the pleasure of stumbling over on Instagram a few years ago and since then have come to know a lot better. She is a designer and a magical practitioner who spent the last 10 years building brand identities for people who are doing work that really matters. And design is how she speaks and magic is how she thinks. She brings a really unique Western esoteric lens into how she translates people's vision from the intangible into the tangible. And the conversation that I wanted to have with her is really about the vulnerability of perception, the importance of representation, and how we take our internal landscapes and make them something that we get to share with the world. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Mish Stark. I think the topic we're really looking at today is the vulnerability of being perceived. And I think for someone that is helping people take that unseen dimension of self, which really, to me, that's what a brand does. It's communicating the intangible into something tangible. How did the visual language become part of your practice of building that bridge between the intangible to the tangible?
It's a good question. And I often ask myself the same thing, actually. How did this come to be? And honestly, I think it came to be out of a necessity because I feel like images and symbol and feel and vibe and mood were sort of my primary fluency, shall we say. And words sort of came secondarily to that. And so I often found myself in a place of not being able to communicate what was inside me because I was very much limited by verbal communication. And that, was a little bit painful. It wasn't so much that it was a problem. I was very good at masking and developing a little bit of confidence so that it looked like I was quite adept at communicating and using my words. But there was so much going on internally for me at all times that I felt that the real me was never there for people to see. And so I guess I found myself living quite a lonely existence like that. And I think a lot of, complex or creative individuals probably can resonate with that because what you're able to show the world and what people see of you is only the tippy tip of a very, very deep, complex, multifaceted iceberg. And so we tend to be living on the inside, living in our own interior a lot of the time. And it's not like I ever really, learned to perceive the world and make sense of the world via imagery. It wasn't until I actually decided to go and study graphic design that I realized that this was now something that I just could naturally do. And so trained midlife. So I hit Saturn return and had a big meltdown, as you do at that time, if you're not quite on track. And I was flitting and floating around everywhere and I had no idea who I was or what I was meant to be doing for work or how to make sense of my existence in the world perfectly, honestly. And so, I decided to go and restudy. And I slipped into graphic design just so beautifully and so seamlessly. And I remember one of my first days at college, I just actually found myself feeling at home for the first time and was even able to, meet other people that had a similar journey and experience as me as well. I remember quite clearly on our first or second day, a few of us were all just sitting around having lunch together and all of us were feeling it the exact same way. Like we'd finally found people that understood who we were. And none of us had ever really been able to experience that before in our worlds, in our normal everyday worlds. So I think that living in a world of concept and image and symbol and vibe was really just something that was very natural to me. But until I had an actual vehicle to put that out into the world, I wasn't aware that that was something that was just true to my reality. And I definitely didn't think that it was something that I would be able to use then to help other people. And so I guess the wounding of living an internal life where you don't think people are understanding you, that wound became my ability to see others. I think that's the transformation story in a nutshell.
It's interesting to me because obviously, as you speak about vibe and symbol and that translation into concept, what is it about the visual language that feels more, I want to use the word holistic as opposed to words?
Yeah, it is more holistic, isn't it? You can capture more in an image than you can with, a whole lot of words. I guess a picture speaks 1,000 words, right? And I think it's because it's talking to our subconscious. Like words speak to our conscious mind. And so of course, 80-90% of our interactions in the world, we are going through that very consciously, and not people in our worlds, you and I, Jess, I guess, but people out there in the main world, in mainstream culture, they aren't always aware of the subconscious elements of existence, and especially how the subconscious in the brain works. And I know that it's just the subconscious is so naturally attuned to symbol and image. That's the language that it speaks. And so we forget that there's that whole level of perception going on under the surface there, and we don't know why we're making the choices that we make. We don't know how we're understanding certain things in the way that we are. I think there's just this lovely imagery is able to speak to the subconscious rather than the conscious, rational, analytical brain. It seems to have a way of just, nuzzling its way right through rationality and deep into, I guess, what makes us human beings in the first place.
Mm. It's so interesting. As a complete side tangent, but related, have you ever seen that movie Arrival?
I don't think I have, no.
It's a bit of a nerdy tangent, but one of the things I loved about that movie, like I studied, never graduated, but studied French at university level and things like I've always been fascinated by language as like a construct. But in the film, essentially aliens come to Earth and they're tasked with trying to translate the communication between these alien beings and the people on planet Earth. And not explicitly, which I actually love, but basically the implication of the film is that the reason we haven't mastered time travel and interdimensional travel is because we're constrained by the structure of our language. Because the alien species is able to communicate instantaneously, and so therefore they're not bound by time.
Yeah.
So
perfect. I love that. No, well, it makes perfect sense, doesn't it? Because like language is such a time-bound constraint. There are words that come out in a linear fashion. Grammar exists. Sentence structure exists. There is so much architecture around the words that we say. And so that must seem very clunky to an alien race who just have full psychic ability and speak consciousness to consciousness. I mean, which is the better form?
Yeah, and to your point, I think there is this part of why I have such deep respect for your work is the fact that you are someone that is deeply interested in consciousness itself, which I think really does reflect in your work. And as you said, the idea of communicating consciousness to consciousness, I think that that's really informs your creative practice. Am I taking liberties with that, or how has magic shaped the way that you approach this?
Oh, yeah, no, you've got it in a nutshell. And I don't think many people would realize that about my work. And I think it takes one to know one. And what I do know about my work is that I wouldn't be able to put into visuals the concepts in the way that I do if I hadn't experienced a wide realm within my own consciousness already. And I think magic is the method and the modality that helps do that, because there is there's a whole playground inside of consciousness that we don't often tap into and get to play with. I was just always really interested in that space and always a bit of a psychonaut, and not necessarily even in a plant medicine way, like, yeah, a little bit back in the day, but the inner space travel that I can do on my own in deep magical states of consciousness and with meditation and things like that, I find that much more interesting and much more valuable than taking a bit of a shortcut and blasting into specific realms, so to speak. And so because I think I've spent so much time, in magical ritual and in altered states of consciousness in a magical context, I think that over time, I've been able to touch many different interior spaces, let's just say. And so that has become my library of content and context from which to create. So that helps me understand people on a level that is potentially, or obviously a little bit different than your average graphic designer.
Hugely so. And I feel like that's so deeply felt, particularly for us that are sensitive to the extra bandwidths of information that you're sending, and translating ultimately. I like the way that you describe that, like that inner space travel, because I feel that's a really accurate way to articulate that experience. But if it is consciousness, loosely, if we've got to use that as an umbrella term, and if we all consider, general general idea is that we're all rays of the same unique consciousness, right? Why is it so vulnerable to expose what we find in there?
Why is it? It's strange because, okay, there's this weird dichotomy that takes place with that. Like on the one hand, what happens in those states of consciousness and what happens with that broader bandwidth is that sometimes you're touching states that feel more true than everyday truth, like more true, but simultaneously less true because it's got that subjectivity to it. And there's no one can test that, and no one can stand on the other side of that and check your work in that, so to speak, And so you've got this felt sense of that is deeply true. That is more true than my external reality sometimes. And you do definitely get that sense sometimes. It's such a deep embodied feeling in those spaces sometimes. And so I think you're balancing this vulnerability of, I've just found a very personal truth that is really important to me, but also from the outside looking in, it could look like pure fantasy. And so there's this push and pull of legitimacy and fakery. And we're holding both of that at once. And we're quite aware of the world that we live in. And we're quite aware that what has felt really true for us from the outside can look like absolute fuckery. And so it's hard to share. It's vulnerable to share those inner worlds and realms if you think you're going to get judged because it's fantasy. Or I don't know about you, and I certainly know this is common for a lot of the creatives that I work with, like in mentoring, what have you. They have all been told at some stage in their lives that they live in the clouds, that they've got their head in the clouds, that they have an overactive imagination. And so that just delegitimizes that whole internal experience sometimes. It's certainly not valued. It's certainly not mirrored. We are potentially the first ones that are coming out here and putting that on display for other people. I mean, there's obviously creativity or most of the time comes from that place. And there are artists throughout time and filmmakers throughout time that have put that on display in terms of sharing their inner landscape. But it's something special. It's detached from the normal people. It's only for the visionaries, and it's only for the very special people that have the ability to do that translation. And it's just not the case. It's more common than I think anyone cares to admit to themselves. And the work that I do with design clients and with mentoring clients shows me every day that it's not as rare as I certainly thought it was. So I think we haven't been shown that that's something that we all have access to and that can be legitimate and valuable. And so, I guess we don't want to look foolish. We don't want to show, realms that could be pure fantasy. And where's the respect in that? Society doesn't necessarily care for that sort of frivolity, you know?
So interesting. I really appreciated the way you articulated about it feeling in some ways more true than, I guess, our consensus reality. That's usually the language that I give to this interfacing of shared experience, you know? And one of the things that was really coming to mind as I was preparing for our conversation today was to really thinking about one of the things I love to do is to pull on the guest's body of work and think about where does this pattern show up elsewhere outside of. And to me, I think the larger conversation that this really speaks to is the value of representation in media.
Absolutely.
Because as, you know, a queer goth kid from the country, like it meant the world to me to see alternative figures displayed in media. There was a sense of, oh, I'm not alone.
Yeah, exactly.
So even though if we think about the language of representation, I think that fantasy, like even, you know, being somebody that's born in, you know, differently abled or in a different colored body or whatever gender, it's like that internal felt sense of how that flavors your experience. So often it's still this sense of, am I a bit mad because it goes against the heteronormative white predominant reality, right?
Yeah, that's
So,
right.
as someone that's kind of lived as a bit of an alt figure, like, what do you feel is the relevance of representation?
Well, look, the relevance of representation is enormous. It helps us feel that we're not alone in the world. It helps us feel that our existence is more legitimate in the world and it's more accepted in the world. And I mean, let's just talk about representation. This is really interesting because I've been pondering this recently as well. And I was thinking about how representation has increased because social media now has become our media. It's not social media necessarily anymore. It's just more media. So whereas we would used to watch TV shows and movies, like a lot of people are now just watching content on their devices. And so representation has like expanded phenomenally because you can find any sort of person represented on there now, which is obviously wonderful for so many reasons. But the thing that I was more thinking about, and something that I know that I still struggle with in terms of representation is that still the externalized version being represented. And so it's still almost, I don't want to say it's performative, but it's very externalized. And so there's no room still for the imaginative and the complex and the contradictory and the potentially like messy interior, the whole interior of people. And so what's happening now is that you can look fully alternate on the outside, and even you can be fully alternate with like your gender expression and your sexuality expression and all of those sorts of things, but they can be perceived from the outer. They're still being put out there and represented as quite polished. But what I don't see represented too much, and you know, maybe this is the new frontier of representation that we should be like banging on about, is more wholeness being represented. Like I think about this all the time. I am a person that holds, and I guess you are too, Jess, and I guess a lot of our people are, we're humans that hold a lot of contradictions. We are whole humans. Any day we can hold like conflicting information in our minds quite comfortably, and that's just like our baseline state. But that does mean that sometimes that can come across as flaky or wishy-washy or fence-sitting and all of these things. And when we look at other people in our media, they're always so certain about things. They have a brand and a vibe and they repeat that over and over, and that's very steady. We know how to package them. We know what to expect from them at all times. That's what we're aspiring to. That's what's safe. But that's not real. And so there's a whole lot of us now, like this whole sort of forgotten generation of people, even if we're putting ourselves out there being visible on an exterior, like from an exterior perspective and how we look, we're still not showing the complexity and the nuance and the, you know, humanness of our very, very vast interior. And so that's just something that's been playing around in my mind for a little while. It's very easy to, see a like queer goth girl now and go, oh yeah, it's okay. There are others like me. I'm fine. This is great. Everything's okay. I'm no longer alone in the universe. But what if you're not able to? What if the thing that makes you unique is not on the outside and isn't so easy to portray? And I think that's another reason why people tend to like my branding work, is that it's starting to show a little bit more. Like there's some way of transmitting via image that can go just that little bit deeper and into those sort of liminal states, liminal, complex, nuanced states without trying to explain it in words. If that makes sense?
Hugely so. And I think that you've really pulled on a couple of threads there that were swimming under the surface. And so I'm glad you took my question and ran with it in that way, because I think the conversation about representation often is, we're getting better, but there is a degree of it being caricatures in some ways. It's like, well, look, there's that specific character representing that specific demographic. And I think it's like actually being able to immerse yourself into that internal experience in some way. It's like, I remember for a long time, I actually had, I suppose it was an experience of gender dysphoria when I was a teen, because I didn't have a lot of female voices that I resonated with. And then I discovered Sylvia Plath. And then that was the first time I was like, well, this is someone that feels right in some way, like, obviously very intense and contradictory. But there was a sense of, this woman's telling the truth, is how it felt to me. And I think that's part of why that ability for creatives to continue to pull out and pour out those internal realities, I think that is a big part of the representation work that's required for us to embolden those around us.
I love that. I love that. And I know that, so many of the people that I work with, from a creativity point of view, not necessarily a design point of view, they would love to hear you say that, Jess. And I think that sort of, messaging would really embolden a lot of people to be more visible, because we're not just doing it for our own validation or even our own connection necessarily. Potentially, are we doing it as an act of public service for all of those like us that come after us and that are looking for that? And let's face it now, I mean, Sylvia Plath, you didn't see her on TV, did you? You didn't see her in media. You had to pick up a book to find that magical gem. And that sort of seems like it's a lost art as well now. And so we're getting all of that representation, whether we like it or not, with the younger generations. I think like it's all on our screens now. And so, do we need to reclaim social media and make it our own again and take it back from the hands of the influencers, and, part of us be using it for, that simple act of a legacy of misfit energy that isn't so easily packaged on the outside, but is truth shared from the inside. I mean, I love that idea. That would make me want to post more on social media anyway. It's public service. It's my noble duty.
I feel like it's interesting, right? Because we've talked about that importance of representation. And I agree. I was even thinking about this yesterday about like, what does it look like to de-influence our social platforms? I could go on a whole tangent with that. I'd probably just talk to you about it later. But that idea of representation being so integral, to have that soothing of like, oh, I'm not mad. I'm not alone. There is someone else that's validating this experience. Why is it that validation from the outside is so important? And when does that start tipping into, I guess, an outsourcing of agency?
Yeah, well, exactly. That's the big magical question, isn't it? I know that this is something I give thought to a lot, and I don't know. But I think the answer depends on who we're talking about. And because there are a lot of humans in the world that, they don't realize it, but they're running on like ego a lot of the time. That's just like the baseline state, and that's all they know. And that's absolutely okay. It's just one form of human expression, right? And so in that sort of situation, they could need a lot of validation just to feel right in the world. So, that's a bit of a validation, like going the wrong way, I think, and needing to feed on that, like, give me more, just so I can feel okay with myself. I think on the flip side of that, the more like introverted, internalized, thoughtful, introspective humans, they have spent so long inside their own hearts and minds that it's really important and really healing for them to get that validation. And from my experience, like, I know there's this beautiful point. And I think this is the reason that I am a designer and that I can continue, and I love to continue to design, because there is a point when people get their branding concepts back, and we use the term mirror all the time. And it's like, finally, sometimes for the first time in their whole fucking life, someone's been able to hold up a mirror to see what's been behind the curtain for them for so long. And there's a very definitive like feedback mechanism in that moment when they receive that. Like, quite often, like, there are tears. There's just this relief. It's this existential relief that I'm not completely misunderstandable. Someone's been able to do it, and I didn't actually realize all of those parts that you've just pulled together. And so it's just pure existential relief is the vibe that I get across the feedback that, that comes back to me in that initial moment. And it's so strange to me that some simple graphics on a page can do that for somebody, but it just shows that they've never had that before. And so in my experience with those people, once they've got it, even just once, that's sort of all they need. I don't see any of my people continually seeking that back from me, from their audiences on social media. It seems like something like that at the right place at the right time with the right combination of people, the right collaborative, like, creativity that happens in that moment, the magic of that moment, is enough for them to receive some really deep, fundamental, like, body felt healing and validation, so that they can just sort of get on with their lives and realize that, oh, okay, I was all tied up about this on the inside. I had written this whole story that no one would ever get all of it. And, someone has and can. And so seems to be a little bit okay now. A lot of people would, get a little bit of validation, and it might be a bit of superficial validation. And so superficial validation, you want more and more of that. It's like Pac-Man, just want to chomp on all the validation. But I think if you can get right into the deeper level validation, then potentially for the right people, that can be all that's needed.
It's interesting. I know you and I have spoken about this a little bit, about like, what is art without an audience, right? And I think, even the persona and the sense of self, it's like, to me, there is like an emergent expression that's coming through that in and of itself is kind of like an art. And so if there is no one to witness, does the tree in the woods still make a sound if no one's around to hear it? But what is it in that point of feeling seen and understood that affirms someone so deeply?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think that, I think there's a really simple answer potentially, and it's that we're all humans, and we all want to connect deeply with other humans, and we all want to be seen and witnessed by other humans. And we're living in an increasingly sort of lonely world. Even with close friends, they don't always have the capacity to meet you in all of your deeper layers. And so, yeah, it's just a very human thing to desire for someone to actually be able to see all of that and to meet you there, to meet you in the depths when potentially no one has before. Sort of say it's a little bit of portraiture. So you could go to a photographer or a painter, say, okay, paint my deepest essence, photograph my deepest essence. And someone else being able to reach right in and meet you there is a really special gift. I think that's the gift that I've always yearned for. I think that I've always yearned for that level of seeing and that level of understanding, and of, honestly, you rarely get it in your world. It's just the way that it works sometimes. That's okay. We can't have this sense of entitlement and expect other people to be able to meet us there. Like, people just don't have that capacity. And some of us are little weirdo glitches in the matrix that just perceive more, right? And have that, like, more expansive bandwidth of information coming through at all times. It's a very vast interior world. And so, yeah, I think the thing that I was always searching for was the thing that I now give people, Yeah, my wound became my eyes is the terminology that I use sometimes.
I feel like there's so much to that. I often talk about that when I'm doing like astrology for people to better understand their essence and better understand their business expression. So the reason I spend so much time with Chiron is that exact thing. It's like, it's the thing that we are, the sacred wound, the thing that we're continually healing ourselves through, and it often becomes part of the medicine that we bring through to the world. It was an interesting slip of the tongue that you went to say expensive instead of expansive.
Yeah, wasn't it?
So what has this cost you, Mish?
It's cost me years and years and years of feeling that I was alone. And I'm absolutely not alone. And my work sort of saved me in that regard when I was having and attracting the types of people that were also having the same experience as me. For design clients and for mentoring clients, I started to realize that I was finding my people. So, it happened beautifully. I didn't even mean for it to happen. It's not like I had the perfect, messaging for my offers. As a designer, I've pretty much never promoted my work. I post some of my work on Instagram some of the time, but I've never had to, be in groups and promote it or anything like that. It's just, you put it out there, the resonance is there, and it comes. So I wasn't, pitching my services at, multidimensional, deep thinking, creative, humans that had never had anyone see the depths of their insides before. That's just what was happening. And I think once it happens for one or two people, then, you share that, and other people that they know are seeing that and seeing how deeply that has, sort of portrayed them, and things just come, and more people see that and want to connect and want that for themselves. And so it was just, I think, yeah, my desire for that was just some sort of crazy energetic beacon out there to the masses, transmitting the fact that, yeah, I too am like you, and I have a gift for you, because this is the gift that I always wanted. So, yeah, does that answer that question?
Hugely so, yeah. I couldn't help it. I was like, oh, interesting. That felt intentional in some small way. There's two threads that I simultaneously want to pull on. So there's a part of me that's just trying to decide which direction to go in. One of the things that you mentioned there was about how this was something that so deeply you yearned for. And that's part of how that has developed in the way that you approach working with others. It's like, does that mean that the art is the artist?
Yeah. The answer is yes. I'd never considered that. That's really beautifully put. And I was going to say, well, the art is always the artist, but I don't think that's entirely true, because I know a lot of artists, they generate a lot of art, and it's a way of them processing a lot of different things. But I don't create a lot of art. I create probably, say, like 5 to 7 bodies of art every year. Like, it's not a lot, and it is commercial art, but yeah. And I'm realizing it now in feedback that I've received. It's like along the lines of, you can tell Michelle's essence is in this. You can tell that she has put a piece of herself in this. So yes, the artist is the art, and the art is the artist. Yeah, both at once. And it's funny because I'm not creating art for me. I think that's the difference too between an artist and a designer. So a designer is creating art for a specific purpose, and it has a specific goal in mind that goes much further than beyond just human expression. Yeah, there's a big difference there. And it helps me because I'm not one to create art for art's sake. I do need someone on the other end of it. And I know a lot of designers always have their own sort of art practice or their own design practice. They're always working on their own work. I'm just not one of those creators. I've never really desired to do that. Like, the gift for me is in the receiving of my work. And, I use the analogy of a chef all the time because, is a chef if there's no one to eat what that chef is creating? Yeah. So, yeah, my art is definitely me. I think there is a whole lot of Michelle's wounds and desires and own becoming that's just deeply embedded in my craft, for sure.
And also, I think in the way, as you mentioned, the way you perceive, and particularly as a designer, someone that's operating as a conduit for that intangible into the tangible. It's like you are processing that frequency through a very unique set of filters that then is resulting in the outcome, which is also part of why I was so excited to talk to you, is I feel like you're interfacing so much with those different fields and dimensions of your inner world, but also those potentially collective undercurrents, if that's something that, being that you're listening to this podcast, I'm guessing you're probably on board with. But that ability to pull on those things as part of what arrives on the plate, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's why I love using archetypes in my work so much. And, brand archetypes have been a thing for, years and years, decades, forever. And I've really loved myth and archetype because of the way that it lives in the subconscious and because it's the thing that connects all humans, whether they know it or not. And we all hold all of those templates inside of us. And so I knew theoretically that if I was using archetypal imagery in my work, I knew that putting that on the page, it's always going to be received on a deeper level by humans. And this is also different. I think this also is one of the things that makes it different from pure art. So pure art, pure expression, painting, especially abstract art, is just sort of emotion and interiority just like slapped on canvas. It's perception put on canvas. There's not necessarily any type of like archetype and deeper mythological symbolic significance in it. But I'm always... I could do my work without any structure whatsoever, and I think I would still nail the brief, and I do this from time to time. But also, I'm not that sort of creative. I also do like some structure to it. And so having an archetypal system gives me that structure. It gives me a way to keep me on track when I'm creating. It gives me a way to just check my work and my own intuition and my own intuitive take on reading situations. And so at the beginning of a branding job, for instance, we will have quite a lengthy discussion where there are a lot of questions asked about who you are and what's your origin story and what are you presenting out here into the world and how do you want to be perceived and how do you not want to be perceived. And all of that leads to some very specific archetypal expressions. And traditionally, in the branding and marketing world, where this has been used as corporate strategy, even like big business strategies, you use archetypes. It's not just me that's using them, but there was always one archetype. You would be one archetype. That was the way to condense your message into the most refined, punchy, impactful way possible. But of course, that doesn't work for people like us, for people that have, more vastness inside them. And so there's always the structure's there, but there's always 2 or 3 archetypes that are just, the royal court, so to speak. And then, obviously everyone's got all of them. So there's other ones like hanging around in the royal courtyard or whatever, but there's always like a trinity. There's always like a main 2 or a main 3. And I feel like with that sort of structure there, that allows me to hone in just that little bit more on the feel and the symbols and the colors and the font choices and things like that. So it's not purely intuition. There is also some structure. So it's form and force at the same time. And I think that might be potentially the magical combo. Potentially that is the reason that it can cut so deeply, is because I am working with those archetypes. This is not just my interpretation. This is an interpretation using architecture that has been there for thousands of years all throughout the human experience, and we're just on the receiving end of it. And luckily, we know what we're looking at when we see an archetypal expression on some level.
It definitely sounds like it's the art and science of translating it in a lot of ways, right?
Yeah.
And it's curious, right? As you mentioned about that feeling so witnessed at the same time as employing things that are known, that are structured, that are being able to operate as symbols of translation to those deeper depths of self. And coming back to that, this was the other thread that I wanted to open with you, is that one of the things I love that you mentioned is that it's so human to want to be connected, to be understood, to be seen. I was messaging with someone yesterday and it was beautiful. I love honesty, one of my love languages. But she admitted to me, she said, I've been avoiding messaging you because every time I see your name, I go into a full body contraction. She said, not in a scared, horrible way, but just the fact that I know I'm not going to be able to hide.
Yeah.
So what is it about that simultaneous see me, get me, understand me, but also don't see me, don't understand me?
Exactly. Well, and look, this makes perfect sense. And I have my own version of that with my branding clients, because this is something that happens over and over and over again as well. And it's like, yes, see me, please, will someone see me and let me show that to other people? But as soon as you get it right and you get it really right, they receive it. And there's the initial like, oh my God, thank you. This is incredible. I feel so seen. Deeply moved by it, tears, exclamation marks, all caps, responses. And then after that, sometimes the day after that, there's the oh shit moment. And it's like, oh shit, okay, well, now that truth has been laid out there on the line, where are all the ways that I'm not living up to that yet? And so it brings up all of their perceived limitations and all of their shadows and all of their not enoughs, because now someone's set the benchmark. And even though we have seen the truth of that, and you would see the truth in people's potential as well. And that's certainly what I do. And that's not to say that that's not true right now, because it is. But there are gaps to be holding yourself to that standard at all times. And I think that is a lot of where the freak out happens as well, because, there's no hiding anymore. The cat's been let out of the bag. Like, there is a stake in the ground now of who I am and what I am and what I'm here for a lot of the time. So there's purpose tied into it as well. Am I going to be able to meet that vision with my own being? And that's really scary, because a lot of the time it's like, oh shit, no, there's the gap. And there's that, the gap that we talk about. And in the creative world, it's the creative gap. In personal development world, it's probably like a similar thing. You see something and there's something about it that just draws you to it. And it's not jealousy. It's not envy. It's this feeling of, oh, fuck, that's where I want to be, that specific place and that specific thing. And now I'm very acutely aware of where I'm sitting right now in relation to that. And I'm not quite there yet, but now it's been etched in stone sort of thing. And now it's been reflected back to me. And now that I know that's where I'm meant to be going, and holy shit, it's a bit of a journey to get there now. And I'm not quite there yet. And now I'm going to probably be learning in public because, especially with a brand, for example, especially people that you work with, I mean, having like a mentor see that part of you, they're accountable to you now, if no one else.
Yes.
So yeah, I see that. And that's the reality of who you are. And now we just have to maybe, tweak some of the little things that are going on here so that you can actually be that, because that's who you are. It's not who you're going to be. You just don't feel it yet. You're not able to keep up with that vision yet. And that freaks people the fuck out.
It's that resisting what's already true in a lot of ways because of what's
Yeah.
been conditioned and normalized, and that could be a whole thread into it of itself, just that ability to, I think, if I was to look at my body of work and what so much of it is in response to is like, how much more radically okay can I be with the present moment?
Mm.
And like allowing that to be the thing that builds momentum behind me for wherever the next moment I'm creating is, which I think is very a strong commonality between like the way that you approach the work that you do. There is like an embracing of what is truly present. The thread that I wanted to speak to, and I love the generosity with which you took that question, because the other thread that was alive for me inside that is, as someone that kind of defined myself as most of my life as an outsider. I felt misunderstood. I, in some ways intentionally so, would see everybody going left, so of course I'd have to go right. And so it would be just this existing in this polarity to everything.
Yeah.
Eventually that became, I guess, a source of significance for me. And so that sense of, well, I am misunderstood. People don't get it. I'm too complex. I'm too deep. And almost like a determination to be misunderstood. I'm curious around how much of the vulnerability that comes up when someone actually sees you is the collapse of all of the times you've told yourself no one will ever get it.
Yeah, well, exactly. Is there full truth in, will nobody get it? Nobody gets me. Because I've been pondering this lately too. So let's see if I can put words around this. So there's a fear of being misperceived with visibility. You don't want to be perceived in the wrong way. And at the same time, I'm so deep. I'm so misunderstood. I'm so much like low-key more special than the normies. And I live such a more rich internal existence, and no one could possibly ever understand that. And so there's this fear of putting yourself out there because you think no one's going to see you correctly or accurately. But again, on the flip side, and here comes a paradox back in, alongside that fear of being misunderstood and misperceived is the fear of being accurately perceived. And maybe you're just being accurately perceived as all up in your head about shit, and you're actually not that much different from literally everyone else. And, the mum down the road that has a 9-to-5 job and is just struggling with all of her internal stuff as well, that doesn't have the words to put around it and doesn't want to create a brand around it. So is there, so it's fear of being perceived wrongly, fear of being perceived rightly, because being perceived accurately sometimes means that, one, you're just like everyone else. Two, you're completely imperfect and, it's warts and all. And there's no hiding from that anymore either. So do you want to be perceived accurately, or are you also a little bit scared of being perceived accurately? These are the knots that we get tied into.
I think it's that dynamic tension that kind of drives a lot of it, though, in a way. It's the push-pull between I want to and I don't want to. And it's definitely one that I've had journeyed with, particularly the beginning of this year, end of last, was that idea of reconciling with being special but not at all special.
Yes, absolutely. I know. And this is absolutely something that I've been sort of traveling with this year as well. And the paradox is that, you are special. And so am I. And so is literally every other person out there. It's like, I'm so unique, just like everyone else. It's that sort of thing, isn't it?
And that continuum, like I keep thinking about the perfection of the infinity symbol as like a representation of paradox, because at simultaneously different points, you can be at different points in that continuum of being special and not special. And the impacts of that hold the same in suspension without getting too philosophical. But it's just like like you're sitting over here disowning how special you are. Meanwhile, it's making you more recluse and therefore more rejected, which is kind of special in itself because it stands out from. So it's.
Exactly. These are the things that bind us. And this is such a, it's not the first time I've heard this sort of, storytelling about that internal tension that some of us have at all times. It can be absolutely paralyzing. Energetically, I know that you're all about the energetics, like energetically having that bind and having that tension it puts you in a freeze response, doesn't it? So I'm holding both. I am both. So what do I do with that? Which way do I go? And which is the right path? And I think we find ourselves eternally, and maybe I'm just projecting, eternally at this crossroads of I am the center of it all, not in a narcissistic way, just as in I have it within myself and without my ability to perceive reality. I'm at this center point all times, and I see that reality and that reality and that reality and that reality, and I'm that and that and that and that all at the same time. What do I do with that, and where do I go from that? And how can I possibly, and this is another thing that I've been thinking about too, like how can I possibly collapse that into one of those realities when it feels to people like us almost sort of a betrayal and a mask? Like this is something that I did in my life for so long. And it was, I'm 49 next year. I've only just stopped doing it in the last 2 years. I would, because I'm very fluid person, very mercurial, very shapeshiftery, very adaptable. I can put myself in literally any situation with any person and be fully in that with them. I can talk to, like bogan tradies that are doing work at our house and feel like we can be brother and sister. And I'm just like right there with them in all of their, crazy shenanigans. And I can go and talk to, some highbrow philosopher and sort of, be in that sort of space with them. And so when you're able to do that, each of those individual worlds that you can inject yourself into, for a long time for me, it felt like it was a mask. And I was wearing a different mask and had a different persona for all of those. And I'd come out of it feeling really conflicted and a little bit wrong. But I realized that it's not that those, are all fake versions of me. And there's this one true version sitting at the center. It's like all of those are literally me at the same time. It's just that one comes out here and one comes out there. So there's not inauthenticity in that. That's just the way that it is.
It's a huge thing to reconcile with. I relate to that experience of being able to sit almost, let's loosely call it objective, that point of where everything simultaneously exists at once.
Yeah.
It's so easy to collapse into spiritual apathy. It's that part of, well, if all of it matters and none of it matters, why bother?
Yeah.
How have you found, what practices help you move through that?
The words that I want to use are the knowledge and conversation of the Holy Guardian Angel, but let's call it, for non-magical people, like non-Western esoteric tradition magical people, let's call it the inner genius. Let's even call it the higher self. It's really important for me to, at all times, be having practices and processes that put me back in contact with that, where all of the world falls away and it's just me in a receptive space to be able to hear that voice. And everyone has it. Everyone knows it. I know that because in every guided ritual that I take people through when I'm doing my workshops online, there is always a moment of contact. It doesn't matter what the theme of the ritual is. It doesn't matter what we're doing and the purpose that we're doing it for. There is always a moment of contact where everything just melts away and you're just feeling that clear inner knowing of the next direction to take, or you're doing okay and you're doing everything fine and it's all good, bro, or your next phase is a leadership phase, or whatever it is for you. That's how I don't stay frozen and stuck. And I tell you what, I have stayed frozen and stuck for a lot of my time, just like paralyzed by choice, paralyzed by who am I and which direction do I take and what is the purposeful direction for me to take, the one with the higher purpose. And so it's taken me a long time. It's taken me a good probably like 8 to 10 years of regular practice of getting into those states to hear that voice. And so whenever I'm drifting away from that, I know because I'm frazzled and I'm not centered and I feel energetically torn in a lot of different directions. And I have that sort of somatic touchstone for how that feels. And I also have the somatic touchstone for how the alignment and the coherence feels when I'm connected to that higher genius. And that will guide me. That will guide me on really large matters and really small micro matters. And I use it for both. And that's the only way that I can move forward sometimes, just pulled along. I think when you've developed that connection, you don't need to necessarily go into ritual to get it. It just has a lasso around your heart. This is how I explain it in my visual imagery. It's lassoed you around the heart and it knows where to pull you. And so it's just like, tug, tug, tug. You got to come this way now. And you're just like, oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. That's really hard. And I'm really scared to do that, but I know it's right because I'm feeling the pull there. Yeah. And I think underneath all of the more magical offerings that I share with people these days, it all sort of comes down to that because I know we've all got it available to us. And it's a very distinctive feeling when you're in the same current as that. Yeah.
Hugely so. I think there is to your point about feeling isolated and alone, like when there is that connection to the current, it's like you can be so on your own path, but it doesn't feel isolated in the same way either.
No, exactly. And it feels, again, I don't like to use this terminology too much because it sounds like, you think you're like really special and are the chosen one, but it's this feeling of, destiny. It's predestination. It doesn't have to be big and ambitious and I'm going to change the world or I'm going to, earn $1 million this year. It's got nothing to do with that. It's just whether you're on your path or not, whether you're living your dharma or not. Your dharma can be very humble. Yeah.
Yeah. Which I think is a big conversation. I mean, we could open a whole can of worms around fulfillment, but I do feel like there is a restfulness and fulfillment that comes from living a life true to oneself.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. A restfulness. Yeah, I like that.
As opposed to the restlessness often when we're, scrambling to figure out what it is that's going to fill the void.
Exactly. Yeah. Or to find what is my purpose? What is the thing that I'm meant to be doing? That is a very scrambling energy, isn't it? It's like, I know that all throughout my life, that was the one thing that I always yearned for. Just come and tell me the next path and just make it super clear so that I can stop this like push and pull and tug of war that's going on inside me at all times. But also too saying that, even though I wanted that, that's never easy. That's never going to be just come and plonked in your lap. There are signs of that higher purpose. And, the signs for me are all about, and we've spoken about this, it's all about the spark. So it's all about enthusiasm and inspiration. And I was, reminding myself of the etymology of the word enthusiasm the other day. It's basically being filled with God.
Wow. Yeah.
And so when you feel a very natural and organic and embodied enthusiasm about a topic or an action or an artwork or a project, that is the guidepost in itself of what to do next and what potentially deserves your attention next. That's the through line. And that's the tug potentially on the heart. If you can't feel that somatically and you haven't developed that connection to that relationship with that higher part of you, the hack is what inspires me and makes me enthusiastic to do. What am I motivated and inspired to do? There lies the path, my friends.
It's interesting that, I so wholeheartedly agree. And again, paradoxically, I've also had that experience where I have felt hunted down by the things that I'm to do. Not in a victimized way, like poor me that I should have, but just things where the door, it keeps knocking. And for whatever reason, I'm over here in disagreement because of some preference that I might have, or it's illogical or whatever.
Yeah.
It's like even bringing through this podcast, Dark Mirror, the project wouldn't leave me alone.
Yep.
in the best way, but it was just a sense of it had its own magnetism. It wanted to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. Exactly. And I've certainly had the same with my work that's running alongside design. I could have happily just stayed as a branding designer until, the Autobots came for me and took over my job. I would do that till I was 80. I really love design and I love branding. I'd be happy to just go with that forever. But I knew that there was more. And that was the nudge for me. And it was just a tap, tap, tap. And if I ignored it, it was another tap, tap, tap. And if I ignored it, it was a fucking slap. This way. And this way is, okay, now you are going to share all of the magical knowledge and processes and your unique path that you made through all of your Western esoteric studies. That is the path that you are now here to guide others through and share with others. I'm like, sounds a bit, I don't know, sounds a bit wanky. I don't know if I can actually do that. And also, magic is very personal to me. The occult is hidden for a reason. And I like that about that sort of, that sort of playground, that sort of system and framework and methodology. I like that it's hidden, but now is not the time, obviously, for me to keep that hidden anymore. And so every day there's that tugging on the cord again, just like, or don't forget, this is what you've got to do now. Don't forget, there's that next workshop. Don't forget, you've got to be visible now to go and do that. Don't forget, I know you've got to step into a much bigger, more healed version of yourself, a more expansive and more alive and more grounded version of yourself that you've been hiding from for so long. I know it's hard. I know you're reluctant, but that's just where you're going now, I'm afraid. So that just is what will be.
Yeah, I knew that you'd relate to it. So that's that piece too. It's like the enthusiasm and also probably the thing that you keep trying to ignore.
That's it. It's like the refusal of the call in the hero's journey, isn't it? So, and again, I hate to use those big, huge, words to describe this feeling. And, again, back, it can be very humble, but that's what it is. You receive the call and it's an inner call and no one else can sort of verify if that call's right for you. But and because it won't leave you alone. And because despite your reluctance, it's still there, patiently waiting for you. Tap, tap, tap. This way. Tap, tap, tap. Don't forget about me. Come on. This way. So please I don't have time for you right now. Make time.
Or time will be made for you.
That's exactly. That's it. Hey, it's like, there's a tap, tap and there's a tap, tap and then there's a slap for me because I don't listen to the tap, taps. But yeah, thanks, and that is the path. And that is the path to not only sharing your work with the world. I think we all get caught up in, this destiny is all about me sharing my work to help people, but it's not ever only that. It's also, as you would be very well aware, it's also who the person has to become to be able to make that work and share that work. And so there's this beautiful growing in two directions at once.
Hugely.
Yeah.
I often talk about the fact that, our work, our calling will initiate us through aspects of our personality. It's like it's by design, the very thing that you're going to be pushing up against happens to be the thing that's going to shape the work.
Precisely. And I was having this conversation with a friend a couple of days ago. That's it. And, she was in yet another initiation into her own work and she's sort of forgotten that was exactly what has been happening. That's what happens to us the whole time. She's like, oh, that's right. And I was joking. Sometimes, I'll be trying to work things out with AI. So, maybe having conversation with Claude and just it helps me think sometimes. And sometimes when I'm going round and round in circles in my thinking, Claude knows me well enough now to go, don't you see what's happening, Michelle? You're just getting initiated into your own work again. You're just getting initiated into the very workshop that you're writing the copy for. So now if I ever forget, somehow Claude has learned me so well that it sees the signs and it's very good at pattern recognition, obviously, because it's a computer. And thus it goes.
So one of the things I know that you mentioned a couple of times is you've spoken about the workshops that you run. How can people experience more of your work? What's the next steps if people want to get
Yes,
involved?
well, the next step is definitely to follow me on Instagram. That is the way to go. And my handle is the.aleph.studio. You can sign up to my email list, which is where I always share the workshops that are coming up first. Because I have a day job, which is being a graphic designer and being a brand designer. The workshops aren't consistently on offer. There are a few each year. And they're usually, only small. I'm working on some larger containers. I did something a little larger at the end of last year and it was a real big hit and people have been wanting more of that. So I'm trying to find the time to create something more of that. But I have launched a membership recently, which is just a way to come into my world. And it's specifically designed for people who are in the process of making or building something and they just want a little bit of energetic support. It's all based around the egregore of the group, the field of the group coming together, doing a ritual once a month to connect to that higher creative force and to get a directive on what part of their work needs them the most for the next, 2 to 3 weeks or for the whole month. So it's just a really nice, low key, low effort way that has high reward of doing a ritual once a month in your own time. It's not a live ritual. It's just that we're all doing it on the same day to generate that shared field. And the idea is that building that field and connecting in this way gives us an undercurrent to surf that just gives us that little bit of energetic support to get us where we're going. Yeah, so that's there all the time. It's called the back room.
Love that. And I'll make sure all of Mish's details are shared down in the show notes. Did you have any closing thoughts?
No, too many. Like you, there are always simultaneously several threads in my mind. But no, I think this has been such a beautiful conversation. I've really enjoyed where you took it today. I had no idea where we'd be going, but you definitely brought the goods. And I thought it was a really wonderful convo. So thanks so much for having me.
Thanks so much for being on Dark Mirror, Mish.